Welcome back, citizens. Caroline here. While most of the 27 amendments, and especially those in the Bill of Rights, focus on rights and protections for people, there are exceptions. Several amendments have been proposed and approved in order to improve government and the way it functions, and some pertain specifically to the election of our nation's leader. Today we will take a close look at those amendments and how they help our nation and its citizens. Our objectives today are to describe the changes in the way government functions based on Amendments 10 through 27, and to summarize why each of these amendments was added to the Constitution. Keep in mind that we aren't looking at all of those amendments, just the ones that deal with government functions and procedures. Make sure you have your guided notes ready before we get started. Have you ever wondered how power is divided between the federal government and the 50 states? Wonder no more. The 10th Amendment says that powers not delegated to the U.S. government by the Constitution are reserved to the states and the people. It also prevents the federal government from assuming powers not outlined in the document. Simplified, this clarifies a division of power between the U.S. and state governments. The federal government has only powers issued by the Constitution. Everything else belongs to the states and the people. So states have the right to make their own laws about other topics. This is the basis for the system of federalism, in which power is shared between states and the U.S. government. Duties delegated to the federal government include maintaining the military, printing money, and dealing with foreign nations. Other powers are reserved to the states, which means only they make laws to deal with specific issues, such as holding elections and providing education. Then there are some powers, called concurrent, that both the U.S. and state governments possess. These include taxes, courts, and making laws. The idea was to continue the separation of powers so that not only is power divided between three branches of government, but also between different levels. The 10th Amendment was included in the Bill of Rights in large part to meet the Anti-Federalists' demand to limit the power of the federal government and to reinforce the premise that states' rights would not be infringed upon. The rest of the amendments can be split into two categories. One group deals specifically with government functions and procedures, like the 10th, while the other relates to one specific government office. Let's start with the first group. The 11th Amendment was ratified in 1795, the first approved after the Bill of Rights. It restricts citizens from filing lawsuits against states in federal courts. This amendment overruled the Supreme Court's decision in 1793's Chisholm v. Georgia, in which an individual sued the state. The court declared that states do not have sovereign immunity, which is an exemption to do something wrong. The 11th basically reversed that ruling, sending such potential lawsuits to state courts. The 16th Amendment became effective in 1913 and allows the federal government to collect an income tax from citizens. The average American loses about 13% of their pay to federal income taxes, and another 20% of their earnings goes towards various other taxes. Income taxes serve as the primary source of revenue for the federal government and allow it to pay for government services. More on that in future lessons. We include the 17th Amendment here, even though we've discussed it before. You may remember that it gives citizens power to directly elect U.S. senators. Finally, the most recent amendment, the 27th, empowers voters to make changes if they are unhappy with their U.S. senators and representatives. That's because the 27th, originally proposed with the Bill of Rights before its approval in 1992, states that congressional pay raises do not go into effect until after the following election. You see, congressional pay is set by, Congress. So if voters are unhappy with an increase, they can vote those representatives out of office. Would you believe that of the 17 amendments approved since the Bill of Rights was ratified, 5 of them are related somehow to the office of the President of the United States. The 12th Amendment established the Electoral College system, the process by which the President is elected, in 1804. All presidential elections since have employed this system. The Constitution established a process that was used for the first 4 presidential elections, but it quickly became clear that change was needed. The old system allowed electors to cast 2 votes, but no distinction was made between the offices of President and Vice President. The candidate that received the most votes became President, while the runner-up was named VP. This system resulted in the President being paired with a VP with different political beliefs, such as John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Thus, the change to separate ballots for President and Vice President. The 20th Amendment reduced the time in which a president-elect waits to take office, shortening the lame duck status following November elections. It allowed an elected president to begin work 6 weeks earlier in January and pushes an individual voted out of office, a lame duck, more quickly away from the top position in the executive branch. The 20th also has a provision stating that if a president-elect dies before taking office, the VP-elect would become president, clearing up a potential issue regarding leadership of the nation. Ever hear of Franklin D. Roosevelt? He was the 32nd U.S. president who served in office from 1933 until his death in 1945. FDR was actually elected by the people 4 times as he guided the nation through the Great Depression and World War II. That exposed the potential for an abuse of power, as no president before FDR had ever been elected to even a 3rd term. The 22nd Amendment now limits presidents to only 2 elected terms, meaning no one will break Roosevelt's record. In a previous lesson, you learned that the 23rd Amendment gave citizens of Washington, D.C. the right to vote in presidential elections, and gives D.C. an equal number of electoral votes as the least populated state. The final amendment on our agenda is the 25th, which solidifies the line of succession for the presidency. That means it lists who takes over if the president dies, resigns, or is removed from office, and how. The vice president steps in if something happens to the president, right? But who is named to the position if something happens to both the president and the VP? It goes to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, followed by the President pro tempore of the Senate, and then the Secretary of State. This was first established in the Presidential Succession Act of 1947. The 25th also provides clear instructions to temporarily transfer power in the event of an illness, medical procedure, or other instance. While many of these amendments are not focused on citizens' rights, some specifically empower citizens to elect senators, maintain checks on their congressional representatives, and allow residents of the Capitol to have a say in their most famous resident. Others are designed to help the U.S. and state governments function more efficiently, and several provide clarity on issues related to the office of the president. Knowing your rights and understanding how the government functions is a huge part of being a good citizen. It's also important to vote, debate, and participate, and remember to always be clever.